शान्तमादित्यवर्णं तमसः परस्तात् तमेव विदित्वा यतिमृत्युमेति नान्यः पन्था विद्यते अयनाय। ॐ प्रजापतिश्चरति गर्भे अन्तर्जायमानो बहुधा विजायते। ॐ तस्य योनिं परिपश्यन्ति धीरास्तस्मिन्नः तस्थूर्भुवनानि विश्वा तस्थूर्भुवनानि विश्वा। या कुन्देन्दुतुषारहारधवला या शुभ्रवस्त्रावृता या वीणावरदण्डमण्डितकरा या श्वेतपद्मासना या ब्रह्माच्युतशङ्करप्रभृतिवीरदेवे सदा वन्दिता सा मां पातु मीरा भगवती निःशेषजाड्यापहा। ॐ सर्वगणे सर्ववरदे सर्वदुष्टभयङ्करी सर्वदुःखहरे देवी महामीरा नमोऽस्तु ते। सिद्धिबुद्धिप्रदे देवी भुक्तिमुक्तिप्रदायिनी मन्त्रमूर्ते सदा देवी महामीरा नमोऽस्तु ते। आद्यन्तरहिते देवी आद्यशक्ते महेश्वरी योगदे योगसम्भुते महामीरा नमोऽस्तु ते महामीरा नमोऽस्तु ते। ॐ नमो अरविन्दाय। ॐ नमो अरविन्दाय। ॐ नमो अरविन्दाय। ॐ नमो अरविन्दाय।
Mantras of our Divine Mother. Our Divine Mother says, the Divine Grace is with us and never leaves us even when the appearances are dark. In each human being, there is a beast crouching, ready to manifest at the slightest unwatchfulness. The only remedy is a constant vigilance. With my love and blessings, says our Divine Mother. Words of our Lord Sri Aurobindo, taken from the book Letters on Yoga, Part 2, Chapter 1, The Divine Grace and Guidance, Subtopic, The Divine Grace. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says the divine will works in all things. It may work out anything, whatever. The divine grace comes in to help and save If you would know what is the divine grace, it is necessary first to realize that it is something which contradicts the law of the world, for it is outside its normal rule and not of its nature. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, our senses discover no visible presence of the divine. Our intellect can do without any idea of its intervention. But it is another experience than that of the intellect and the senses, which once it is there will no longer let us escape from the presence or refuse to see the intervening will or the grace. This world is a world of ignorance, and by ignorance, a world of strife, seeking, error, and suffering. We start by knowing nothing and have to learn everything because our knowledge is a mixture of truth and falsehood, and our will constantly mistaken when not perverted. We stumble at every step and pay the price of experience in pain and grief and sorrow. It would seem as if nothing could save us, but thought and knowledge translated into right will and action, and it is that for which man by his intellect is seeking, and yet by his intellect has never found it, and it looks as if by his intellect he would never find it. Then there is probably something else beyond the intellect. There is probably something else beyond the intellect which alone can give him the light, something beyond his mind and greater than himself, a grace that intervenes, the law of a supernormal light and will, a help and opening from above. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, an opening from above. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, I would like to say something about the divine grace, for you seem to think it should be something like a divine reason acting upon the lines not very different from those of human intelligence, but it is not that. Also, it is not a universal divine compassion either, acting impartially on all who approach it and acceding to all prayers. It does not select the righteous and reject the sinner. The divine grace always aids. It is a power that is superior to any rule, even to cosmic law. For all spiritual seers has distinguished between the law and the grace. Yet it is not indiscriminate. It has only a discrimination of its own, which sees things and persons and the right times and the seasons with another vision than that of the mind or any other normal power. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, a state of grace is prepared in the individual, often behind thick wheels of means not calculable by the mind, and when the state of grace comes, then the grace itself acts. These are three powers. One, the cosmic law of karma or what else. Second, the divine compassion acting on as it may, as many as it can reach through the nets of law and giving them their chance. And third, the divine grace which acts more incalculably but also more irresistibly than the others. The question is whether there is something behind all the anomalies of life which can respond to the call and open itself with whatever difficulty, till it is ready for the illumination of the divine grace, and that something must be not a mental and vital movement, but an inner somewhat which can well be seen by the inner eye. It is there, and when it becomes active in front, then the compassion can act, though the full action of the grace may still wait, attending the decisive decision or change. For this may be postponed to a future hour, because some portion or element of the being may still come between, something that is not yet ready to receive, says our Lord, Sri Aurobindo. Our Lord says, each mind can have its own way of approaching the supreme truth. There is an entrance for each, as well as 1,000 ways for the journey to it. It is not necessary to believe in the grace or recognize a Godhead different from one's highest self. There are ways of yoga that do not accept these things. Also, for many, no form of yoga is necessary. They arrive at some realization by a sort of pressure of the mind or the heart or the will, breaking the screen between it. And what is it at once beyond it and its own source? What happens after the breaking of the screen depends on the play of the truth on the consciousness and the turn of the nature. For as to grace, this grace that we describe it in that way because we feel in the infinite spirit or self of existence a presence or a being, a consciousness that determines, that is what we speak of as the divine, not as a separate person, but the one being of whom our individual self is a portion or a vessel, but not a necessary thing for everybody to regard it in that way. Supposing it is the impersonal self of all, yet the Upanishad says of the self and its realization, this understanding is not to be gained by reasoning or by tapasya, nor by much learning, but whom this self chooses, to him it reveals its own body. Well, that is the same thing what we call the divine grace. It is an action from above and from within, independent of the mental causes which decides its own movement. Let me repeat. We call the divine grace, it's an action from above or from within, independent of the mental causes which decides its own movement. We can call it the divine grace, we can call it the self within, choosing its own hour and way to manifest to the mental instrument on the surface. We can call it the flowering of the inner being or the inner nature into self-realization and self-knowledge. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, as something in us approaches it, as it presents itself to us, so the mind sees it. But in reality, it is the same thing, the same processes of the being in nature. Let me illustrate my meaning more concretely from my own experience of the self. Long before I knew even what yoga was, or that there was such a thing at a time when I had no religious feeling, no wish for spiritual knowledge, no aspiration beyond the mind, only a contented agnosticism and the impulse towards poetry and politics. It is not indispensable that the grace should work in a way that the human mind can understand. It doesn't. It works in its own mysterious way. At first, usually it works behind the wheel, preparing things, not manifesting. Afterwards, it may manifest, but the sadhak does not understand very well what is happening. Finally, when he is capable of it, he feels both. He feels and understands, or at least begins to do so. Some feel and understand from the first or very early, but that is not the ordinary case. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, the ordinary action of the divine is a constant intervention with the actual law of things that may or may not be, but is not usually called the divine grace. The divine grace is something not calculable, not bound by anything. The intellect can fix as a condition, though ordinarily some call aspiration, intensity of the psychic being can awaken it, yet it acts sometimes without any apparent cause or even of that kind, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo. Next topic, the grace and personal effort. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, without the grace of the divine, nothing can be done. But for the full grace to manifest, the sadhak must make himself ready. If everything depends on the divine intervention, then man is only a puppet. There is no use of sadhana, there are no conditions, no laws, therefore no universe, but only the divine rolling things about at his pleasure. No doubt, in the last resort, all can be said to be the divine cosmic working, but it is through persons, through forces that it works, under the conditions of nature. Special intervention there can be and is, but all cannot be special intervention. The divine grace, says our Lord, the divine grace and power can do everything, but with the full assent of the sadhak. To learn to give that full assent is the whole meaning of the sadhana. It may take time either because of ideas in the mind, desires in the vital, or inertia in the physical consciousness, but these things have to be and can be removed with the aid or by calling in the action of the divine force. Our Lord says there are three main possibilities for the sadhak. First, to wait on the grace and rely on the divine. Second, to do everything himself like the full Advaitin and the Buddhists. Third, to take the middle path, go forward by aspiration and rejection, etc., helped by the Divine Mother's force. Everything should be for the sake of the divine, aspiration for the divine's presence also. As for leaving the result to the divine, it depends on what you mean by the phrase. If it implies dependence on the divine's grace and equanimity and patience in the persistent aspiration, then it is all right. But it must not be extended, but it must not be extended to cover slackness or indifference in the aspiration and endeavor. Trust in the divine grace. Our Lord says, face all the things with the inner disturbance and outer circumstances quietly and firmly with the perseverance in the endeavor of the sadhana. Trust firmly in the divine grace, and the divine grace will not fail you. The best possible way to repay the divine grace is to allow the divine grace to work in you, never to oppose it, never to be ungrateful and turn against it, but to follow it always to the goal of light, peace, unity, and Ananda, says Allah, Aurobindo.
Countries, continents. The choice is imperative. Truth or the abyss. Nation, continent, le choix est impératif, c'est la vérité ou la vie.